So hello from my side. My name is Marie Niederleithinger. I'm a molecular biologist by training, and I started studying precisely 10 years ago here in Jena. I don't live here anymore, but it was a great pleasure to, when becoming part of the künstlerische Tatsachen team, to have an opportunity, on one hand, to move between fields and disciplines, and also to have a reason to come back to Jena. I have the pleasure tonight to introduce you to our artists, and I will guide you a bit through a journey from how did the artists come here, what led you here, up to the genesis of artistic facts, ? We'll see. That will take us about 30 minutes, and afterwards, don't worry, you will have the opportunity to pose your questions, and our great curator will remind me, because otherwise I would have tons of questions, obviously, to all of you, but yeah, you should have your time too. So I will start with you, Masami Saito. You originate from Japan, but you're living in Germany since 2012. For 2 years by now, you're working and living in Erfurt. And in your work, you're mixing drawings with graphics, objects, and installations. Then we have Luca Spano, an Italian artist. His research focuses on an image architecture. He explores the behaviors of image components, their uses, materiality, in relation to socio-anthropological dynamics of our society. What is an image? He investigates. Recurring topics in his work are representation, knowledge construction, and colonialism. His practice moves between image-based works, installations, and sculptures. Next to him, Andrea Garcia Vasquez, born in New Jersey, lives and works in Leipzig since 2015. In her installations, she combines handwork craft techniques with digital components. Her artistic research is about the human-to-nature relationship. In the studio, she works heavily inspired by material and the stories that come out of combining textures, substances, and symbols. Here we have Klaus Schöning Lam Yong. He's about to move from Berlin to Vienna this weekend. Klaus has an academic background in the natural sciences, as well as in the fine arts. He primarily uses methods and materials to create sound and images. Scientific expertise to him is a spawn point for poetic and political possibilities for change. Last but not least, Tamara Knapp is a multidisciplinary graphic designer from Weimar. In her work, interdisciplinarity is key. She sees her vocation in the creation and documentation of new aspects in the field of visual research. In general, she likes to draw her inspiration from inconspicuous everyday materials. Her soft spot is the intangible. So I would like to start or get this panel discussion started with the how did you come here? So my first combined question is, have you collaborated with scientists before coming here? And what, to you personally, was the main motivation to take part in this residency?
Yeah. Thank you, Marie. I've worked with scientists before. I mean, as a scientist, I work with scientists, but also as an artist, I work with scientists, and it was also here. Some of them are here. I'm very happy they have come, and I haven't met them as scientists really. I would rather say I've met them as human beings. And my motivation why I wanted to come here is because Jena is a very interesting city, has a very interesting history, also entangled with the sciences, but also with the arts and literature in general. So, I mean, the Romanticism took its first turn here in the city, and then about 6 years later, optics was kind of reinvented, formalized, and there was the possibility to production process was also established here. So it's a very interesting city regarding everything that has anything to do with images that flow through lenses, which are basically all images. That was my motivation.
Thanks a lot. This was even 100 motivations, kind of.
Sorry, ich spreche auf Deutsch. Ich habe früher mit den Wissenschaftlern noch nie gearbeitet. Ich habe wegen meiner künstlerischen Praxis mit wissenschaftlichen Materialien auch gearbeitet, aber indirekt ich habe nur mit dem vom Buch studiert oder Internet gegoogelt und so weiter. Und bei diesem Residency konnte ich mit einem direkten Wissenschaftler arbeiten. Also ich konnte ganz real leben oder real Methode von Wissenschaftler lernen und die Erfahrung, und das war wirklich eine schöne Erfahrung. Und ja, genau. Yeah. Yeah.
So, hi everybody. Thanks for being here today. I just want to steal a couple of seconds to thank the organization, Marie, Paulina, etc., that made this exhibition, but I would say this experience possible in some way. So, getting to the question, what took me here? In some way, probably faith or destiny, I would say, which is a big component because there was an open call, so I got selected, and that is already like kind of, fate, destiny, exactly. Aside from that, my interest in this residency was pretty obvious. As Marie stated, I'm really interested in the image itself as an object, as a research object. And this residency, because of the story of the city, of course the industry connected with it, the science related to image making, etc., was a very big. It had a very big appeal on me.
Did you work with scientists before?
I worked with scientists before, but not at this level, or better, I worked in laboratories before, more than with scientists. Okay. Especially laboratories where they were producing specific kinds of glass and stuff like that, but never like hand in hand, let's say, with scientists. And that was a great experience. And there are so many, we received, or at least I talk for myself, I received so many inputs that I'm still in the process of processing them.
And so, we will get to the process in just a minute.
Okay, perfect. So I'm gonna give the microphone to Andrea in that case.
The process of processing. I have never worked with a scientist before. I have done lots of theoretical research. My diploma that I finished last year was specifically looking at the commodity of nature and how culture and humans have turned plants and nature into things that we purchase and the experience of it. And in that research, I studied a lot about the Romantics and the early German Romantics. So when I saw the open call, I was like, yoo-hoo, I want to do this. So yeah, that's how I found it. That's what attracted me. And it was a really, really, really cool experience to be collaborating and meeting and visiting these different places where people are doing jobs that I could never have imagined from my studio. So thanks.
It feels like we should have a sparkling wine already now, but let's continue a bit with the panel and the drinking later.
Well, I was also working with some kind of scientists before. I, for example, did my bachelor thesis about visual perception, and there I was working, for example, with a school of blind children and the doctors there, and I had some very interesting conversations with them and found it very inspiring to see the different fields I could include in my design. And I was also working with the Technical University in Ilmenau, and there I used, for example, multispectral cameras and was talking to them and had some interviews which I collected and made a magazine, for example, out of it.
And as you're living close by, living and working close by, was it something surprising that you found out about such a residency in such proximity, or?
Yeah, I was really happy to find it because since April this year, I am working at Bauhaus University in the fields of graphic design. And there we have the space for visual research. And we are also working there on different kind of fields to include and be inspired in design. But with this field, like the arts and science, I think this is even more interesting because we can really work with some facts there and not be completely free with our thinking as an artist or designer and get some real facts into our design and art.
So we will come to the scientific input in just a moment. But as you guys already mentioned, that it was something special to you to work, really collaborate with the scientists, that would be my next question to you. Like how or which role actually did the scientists play in your process? And maybe okay, the trained scientists was more working with humans, as he stated. So which role did humans play in your process?
Oh, I think they played every role, but especially these scientists that you had also organized to stay in contact with. They were scientists that said beforehand, okay, we want to participate in this artistic project. So there was a kind of interest there in the first place, which was very nice because that was a beautiful starting point to just go off with your project. And for me, they were really the people that enabled a lot of things. I mean, they showed me around. They described the details of their methods, of their protocols. When I had a question, like crazy questions, they would always have an ear for me and try to answer the stupid question. So yeah, and also there were, for me, it was also my cast. So I was filming, and I was filming scientists.
So they were literally playing a role in your process. Okay, and there is no such a thing as a stupid question, as you know. But
bei diesem Projekt haben die Wissenschaftlerinnen sehr große Rolle gespielt, weil ich früher nur auf dem Buch oder Informationen im Internet nur das Ergebnis, die schon von Wissenschaftlerinnen geforscht wurden, nur einfach genommen habe. Aber ich habe im Labor einfach das Prozess von Erzeugnis geguckt und selber erfahren und von diesem Ereignis habe ich viel gelernt und ich konnte auch in diesem Prozess ganz positiv teilnehmen und damit konnte ich die Arbeit, die ihr in diesem in diesem Ausstellung gucken konnte schaffen. Ja, das war super. Ja.
So for me, of course, like all the other residents of this residency, scientists played a key role, and especially because I came here I didn't have a real interest in trying, instruments or understanding perfectly how things were working, technologically speaking, let's say, because I don't have a scientific background, and I'm also not interested in having it, honestly. Not because I don't find science interesting, the opposite, but it's because I want to keep this sort of fascination, like a child that doesn't understand what he has in front of him, but it's still looking at it with the eyes of the discovery. So knowing too much cages the artist, I think. There is a certain level of knowledge that you need to acquire in order to play with the discipline or with the matter that, again, you're working with. But there is a threshold, and I'm not interested in going over this threshold. But stepping back to the scientists themselves, as I said, I wasn't interested in the technology itself, but I was more interested in the people. So the biographies, the experiences of the scientists, their thinking. And their thinking, I'm not saying just their thinking in relation to science, but their mental system of interpreting the outside through the structure that science created or shaped in their mind. Okay, so it's much more a cultural interest for me rather than a technological one. And so they played a key role for that, for sure.
I would say that for me, I was working with sort of a couple of scientists in different types of phases. And I think at first I was trying to do what Luca from the beginning wasn't doing. At first I was trying to understand, I think, and be able to learn. And that would take a lot longer than 3 months. And then I realized that what I was really interested in is sort of this invisible aspect of what happens within the research and within the laboratories, and all of the materials that they're using, and all of the effort and work and trial and error that goes behind all of the research. And that related to me and my own process as an artist, and that studio practice and trying. So I think the role that the scientist took was sort of like a reference point, as if I was researching, but just having the person in front of me to ask the questions and try to understand it somehow a bit better, and to learn through discussion and visiting places and seeing what they do.
Well, I found it very surprising, actually, to see that the scientists I was working with had so many similar interests to mine in how he processes the pictures and how he's working with them and what he is like searching for, and to see that scientific part is also taking place in like my visual work, and to have this sort of connection between the scientists and me as a designer. And that was very inspiring to see and find out in this residency for me.
Thanks a lot. And it was now from behind the scenes, it was also super interesting to learn about your relationships and the dialogues and exchanges that you had. And just to comment on your statement, Luca, I've heard some rumors that you've been quite an elaborated conversation partner regarding optics. So, well. My next question, obvious question now, is what have you brought to this place, to this exhibition tonight from the lab, and how did you process the science? How did you recontextualize it?
Well, maybe I'm starting, being always the last one. So I brought many graphics here because I was trying to find a kind of notation system from the data sets and images the scientists gave to me. And there I was dealing with very different data sets of different cells and tried to understand and find out how bioinformatic guy, scientist, is dealing with these images and how he's working with them. For example, dealing with different recognition systems for neural networks or segmentations. And there I was trying to deal with these different facts and images in a picture kind of graphic way, and tried to find graphics in it. And I made a form study out of it. I made an archive, which you can see upstairs, and tried to extract different segments of the pictures and images he's working with. And we were in a very good exchange in how I was dealing with the pictures and how he's been dealing with the pictures, and then comparing the different ways from each other and seeing that we can also learn from each other from his field, how I process these images, for example. And upstairs you can find some extracts of my graphics, and also from the digital kind of field I was working with, an analog work of mine where I processed these digital images with photochemistry and try to make analog pictures out of it and visuals.
I have to thank Franziska because she helped me with a lot of the things I brought here. I was working with the Max Planck Institute Werkstatt to do things with sensors and light sensors and movement sensors and angle sensors, and that is definitely something that I would have normally not worked with and not have been able to bring to this exhibition if it wasn't for them. So you and Daniel, thank you very much. Daniel. And I also, every lab, every place, every office that I went to, I asked if they had garbage or just things that they didn't really need anymore. So my installation is full of just things that these labs were gonna throw away, which is also pretty crazy how much material is just thrown away in a lab. So that's also something that you can see in my installations. And I made the tufting piece down here, the carpet textiles, and that's based on more of a conversation, but trying to make that into a physical thing. So yeah, more image-based.
So I had the pleasure to work with 3 different institutes, which were the Optical Museum of Vienna, the Leibniz Institute for Photonics, and the electron microscopy department of the university. So I worked with basically 3 scientists. So a lot of inputs, and it's I really don't know how to explain the process of what you're gonna see up there, and not because I don't know what I did. It's just that putting in words the artistic process, it's very complicated. Yesterday we were doing a radio interview, and Wolfgang Frieske and Timo Mappes were with me doing the interview, and we were talking about this idea of the process, and I just used the metaphor. I love the fact that you get an elephant getting in one ear, and you have a pyramid going out in the other one. Okay, what happens in between, I don't clearly know. Okay. But at the same time, I know that is what I want, which is another. It's very strange to describe it. Okay, so the process is a complicated thing, especially when you're still in the middle of it, which we all are, I think, because the exhibition, it's not the ending point of this project in some way, but it's the starting point. Probably it's just the tip of the iceberg, because a new body of research is just I don't know, getting starting walking on this world in some way. And so in my work there are different inputs, as I said. Part of them come from the aesthetics of tools and instruments. Others comes directly from the images produced in the laboratories. Others comes from the idea of nanoparticles and the light itself. And all of them are connected with between this, this kind of space in between seeing and thinking, or seeing and imagining things. So what about, I was interested in the limits of sight and what happens when technological limits or biological limits reach their ending point, and you start projecting in some way images in your mind in order to predict what is going to be after.
Ich habe mit Wissenschaftlerinnen bei Hagai Hans-Kühner-Institut und September zusammengearbeitet. Und am Anfang war ich nur im Labor als Input, und ich habe dort zuerst Bakterien und Pilze durch das Mikroskop geguckt und auch gelernt, wie man im Labor arbeiten muss und so weiter. Und danach habe ich probiert, auch Agarplatte im Petrischale Pilz zu züchten, und dieser Prozess war sehr interessant, und ich habe das in meinen künstlerischen Prozess gebracht, und ich habe im Labor angefangen, meine eigene Arbeit, ein Objekt zu schaffen, aber das war sehr anstrengend, weil ich immer im Clean-Bench arbeiten musste. Und das war sehr ungewöhnliche Bewegung vom Arm, und ja, das war allgemein schwierig für mich, aber also mit Skulptur ist es noch anstrengender. Und aber dabei haben Wissenschaftler, also der Mario und Sarah, mir viel geholfen, und Mario war ganze Zeit, also sehr lange Zeit, für mehrere Wochen für mich seine Zeit benutzt, und ja, das war sehr dankbar. Ja, genau. Ja.
So a friend I have studied with visited the exhibition already earlier this evening with her little daughter, and then she was pointing to your agar plates and was like, "Look, this is what mommy also does in her lab." It was a very nice moment, I think. And also she was pointing at all those Eppendorf tubes that you have in your installation. And I was like, yeah, isn't it interesting to have these like high turnover plastic thingies that you can use only once next to the really crafting that you also did in the installation, but you can explore this yourself. And you will also have the possibility, of course, to speak to the artists later and to pose your questions in a moment. And I'm so sorry now, but because you kind of threatened me with saying you are going to give a long answer and we're running out of time a bit, I will now give you the final question. In what sense did an artistic fact emerge with your work? Because this is the title of our whole residency, right? So that one is for you, Klaus.
So, I don't like to be first, because when I'm first, I cannot object, And I actually want to object because, Luca, you said before the last thing that you said, because that's how long I wasn't on the mic, you said that artists shouldn't know everything because it cages them. And I'm totally disagreeing with this, because knowledge is power and artists should be powerful. They can forget some things at some points, consciously forget them or ignore them, better to say, but they should know as much as possible, also about the sciences. Yeah, this is the thing that leads us to the fact, and the artistic fact that emerged from my practice here is that that also in other galaxies, aliens, or perhaps in the far future of humanity, which is not, when humanity is not humanity at all, there will still be science. There will still be science.
And art.
Okay, so thanks already for. Thank you for answering my curious questions. Thanks for answering my curious questions, but now it should be the turn of all of you. So whoever wants to take the opportunity to pose a question to our artists, please do so. I know that also some of the scientists are here tonight, so maybe someone wants to. Oh, okay. There's the first question.
Okay, I've got a quick. I can be quite loud, so I don't need a microphone. I wonder if any of you learned a scientific fact that completely blew them away during this process. So, if any of you learned something scientific, a scientific fact to stick with the naming of the event that blew you away in the process.
Maybe can sound like as a very basic thing, but working with the nanoparticles, the fact that a nanoparticle can change the color depending on, of course, the material that is used, but the shape itself of the particle really blew my mind. Like colors for me became shapes. Yeah.
Mind-blowing stuff.
Ja, es ist für Wissenschaftler ganz normale Sache, aber was für mich ganz erstaunlich war, dass der Wissenschaftler viel Versuch macht, bis eine Hypothese nachweisen kann. Und das war, ja, und ich habe auch der Geschichte von eigentlich Wissenschaftlern gehört, dass sie viel leiden. Ja, aber sie hören nicht auf und dass das ist ja sehr geduldig und ja, aber das ist irgendwie ähnlich wie Künstler. Ja.
I learned about the honey mushroom, which is like the largest living organism on planet Earth. And I think I don't remember the number now, but it's like, like more than 15 square kilometers large and like 90,000 pounds or something. I don't know like how heavy it is, but it's it's pretty impressive. And I got to see a sample of it in a petri dish, so that was cool.
Well, because I was working with neural networks and I've never worked with them before and never used them before, I was really fascinated about what a neural network needs, like what kind of input it needs and how it has to be trained to recognize shapes of cells and all these different characteristics of the cells and shapes of it. And that really blew my mind how it's been trained. I think that's really fascinating.
Electron microscopes and TVs are almost the same.
Anything else you want to know?
Yeah, and please speak into the microphone for both the stream and the people watching outside.
How did you choose the scientists that you wanted to work with, or like how come you work with them, or those that you work with in the end?
So I was interested in electron microscopy from the very, very beginning, because it is, first of all, it produces very nice images, but that's not really what I was interested in. I was more interested in this transition between light microscopy and electron microscopy. It's also really a paradigmatic transition there, because it transcends what seeing means. So, and it's also it's attached to a whole other kind of physics than light microscopy also. It's very different, and it marks also like a shift, I think, in the social sciences and in philosophy also.
For me, it was the fact to work with these scientific data sets of images. I was really interested in them because in my normal work, I'm also mostly dealing with pictures and images, and I thought that it could be really interesting to have this kind of comparison to find in data sets of images.
I applied proposing with the Max Planck Chemical Ecology Institute to work with plants, because that was my Diplomarbeit, and I wanted to take the opportunity to really look scientifically at facts on a specific kind of plant, and see how that can inspire the story or emotions, or I don't know, something more poetic that's specific to that plant itself, which was really interesting.
We all received a list of institutions and scientists. That's how it worked, pragmatically speaking. And we had to pick the scientists we wanted to work with. So I just went through the descriptions, and I found very interesting to have different approaches, to work with different approaches. One was much more historical, which is the optical museum. So I could see the evolution of the instruments and the tools. One was a very contemporary one in some way, which was the nanoparticles and the Institute for Photonics. And the third one was contemporary production of images for medical purposes, which is the electron microscopy department of the university. So that's why I choose a different, range of voices to talk and work with.
Ich habe mir die Wissenschaftlerin von HKI und Septomix entschieden, weil sie mit dem Mikrobiom, Mikroorganismus, Bakterien und Pilze in Organe arbeiten. Und ich hab mich interessiert, dass die Organe ein Lebewesen hat in Darm, und ich habe einen Darm, und dieser Darm ist wie eine andere Individuum. Ja, und ja, ich wollte diese 3 Schichten, 3 Layer sichtbar machen. Also ja, und ich wollte von innerer Seite von Organen diese Welt beobachten, wie das aussieht, und ich wollte diese Aussicht visualisieren. Deswegen habe ich so entschieden.
Okay, so I think we'll have an opportunity to talk to one another later in the exhibition as well, and I finally want to get to this point of celebration, because as you've mentioned again, you again gave me some occasion to be super happy, because as you mentioned, this residency has a future, and we're super excited about it. And I think this is also a moment to say thank you to our very first artist in residency. Thanks so much for going on this journey with us. Honestly, it's been lots of fun. It still is. It still is. The evening is still long. And I can't wait to immerse in the exhibition.